Welcome to Lesson 7, the last session of this mini-course. In this lesson, we're going to talk about leadership. So, what is leadership, and what does leadership mean in the context of doing business in China? Traditional leadership in China, dating back to Confucius philosophy, is very hierarchical. This means it's a command and control system that's driven top-down. In the traditional sense, Chinese leaders do not need to be persuasive or develop soft skills, or have a high EQ, because it is perfectly normal for them just to order their subordinates what to do, while at the same time being obsequious to their commanders. And in between all the tasks and activities, many of which are rudimentary and redundant, guanxi is the key to rising up the ranks. Now, as China continues to evolve from capitalism with Chinese characteristics to socialism with Chinese characteristics, to a superpower leading the world in many market segments, we're going to be discussing leadership with Chinese characteristics. So it relates to your relationship with your Chinese employees, partners, and associates. You do need to inspire them. You will need their discretionary efforts to succeed, and you should care how you are perceived by them. The biggest misperceptions regarding leadership with Chinese characteristics probably comes down to your mindset. And that is that people actually will say what they mean and mean what they say. Chinese can be thought of as a figurative language, so speaking in prose or exaggerations is quite normal. Even when you know people are just giving you face as a sign of respect, which is a good thing, it is still difficult for most to reconcile how this disingenuousness is not to be frowned upon, while at the same time, it is also not to be acted upon. That would be getting your ego stroked and then changing your decision. There is a common dilemma that foreign companies face in China. They need local leaders to get things done in China, but they also want their local Chinese leaders to follow global best business practices. This is a misperception, no matter how well the Chinese person speaks English, that they will faithfully follow a Western style of management. Sometimes it is beneficial to take the Chinese approach to get things done in China. This is the results-driven approach, and you should often not even ask or question the methods of your Chinese managers. But there's also a negative side, and this is part of the dilemma. We won't get into the details here, but it is often the way Chinese managers treat their direct reports for the sake of getting things done that leads to high rates of employee attrition in China. Chinese are often conflicted between two dynamics. One is preserving traditional Chinese culture, which is more collectivist, and the other is embracing more Western culture, which is more individualistic. Now, as far as being a leader in China, it's important to recognize that their true intentions and feelings are either masked or they are emphatically expressed. This can create a perception of contradictory behaviors, which is why developing empathy is so valuable for understanding context. Now, let me give you a couple examples of contradictory perceptions for you to think about. Respect is often cultural, and it is not earned or merit-based. So what implications might this have on your perceptions? When people agree, it's either self-serving, hierarchical, or cultural. So how might that impact your understanding of what people really think? Goodwill is like a bank account that should always have roughly a zero balance, and reciprocity is the currency of exchange. One final misperception is that guanxi relationships will necessarily lead to discretionary efforts. In fact, the reality is often just the contrary. What guanxi changes, or when your guanxi relationship changes, so do the expectations of others. So the greatest challenges for leadership in China are similar to all challenges of doing business in China. And that's figuring out what approach might actually compel and motivate Chinese towards a behavior that is more mutually beneficial. So, what do Chinese value most? You may think it's money or family or national pride or even job titles, but it all fundamentally comes down to the one thing that Chinese value above and beyond anything else, and that is their face. All other things that they value can be related back to their face, or 面子. So the Chinese concept of face is the single most important thing for you to understand in order to be a more successful and admired leader. For most foreigners, understanding the Chinese concept of face is the greatest challenge for navigating Chinese emotions and interpersonal relationships. But you cannot talk about face in China without also talking about guanxi, because the two are intertwined and interrelated. Chinese will behave and respond differently depending on the level of guanxi. So understanding guanxi and developing guanxi relationships is also a challenge for foreigners doing business in China and trying to lead Chinese people. For now, we're going to just review the different levels of guanxi. It's important for you to understand that maintaining each level has different requirements and different expectations. The highest level of guanxi is family. So unless you marry a Chinese person, you will never reach this level. And it is important to keep in mind that nepotism is quite normal and expected in China. The next level is a small group of really close friends, like a fraternity. But in China, it is often classmates or childhood friends from the same province. As a foreigner, you probably want to try to reach somewhere between the third and fourth level, where you are no longer considered an outsider. But of course, it is important to understand that everyone begins as an outsider, even when they are giving you face and being courteous and respectful. Not fully understanding the Chinese concepts of face and guanxi will lead to most of the common mistakes that foreigners make. And foreigners often make these common mistakes because they lack self-awareness and cultural awareness, and they don't make the proper adjustments to their attitude, mindset, and approach. Assuming that you lack some degree of awareness, let's examine some common mistakes. I think the mindset of spreading Western values is not healthy. In the context of leading people in China, no one will be impressed when you are perceived to be disinterested in Chinese values. It is also a mistake to debate or explain your position regarding fairness. Just try to be consistent. And keep in mind that explaining some things sometimes only makes things worse, because you can never reach an agreement when you don't share the same fundamental system of values. I taught 5 semesters of cross-cultural management in China to Chinese executives. And emotionally, no one accepts or understands the concept of playing devil's advocate. They may understand its merits in a Western context, but I've rarely seen it work in practice in China. Providing your subordinates constructive criticism is also a delicate procedure. So you really need to observe whether it is actually beneficial or not. Now, some junior staff may appreciate it, given that you're a foreigner, but you need to be aware that any criticism by Chinese definition is not giving face. It is also a mistake to overreact, and especially to display negative emotions. This would be a loss of face for you, and you probably wouldn't even be aware of its implications. So overall, the greatest tip for leadership in China is to develop your soft skills for communicating and managing the perceptions of your stakeholders and your constituencies in China. And as you are developing your essential soft skills, which are empathy and awareness, just try to be consistent with your judgment, your principles, and the way you treat people. And of course, it doesn't hurt to always treat people the way that you would want to be treated yourself. And remember that the only controllable levers to influence perceptions and outcomes basically are your own AMA values. It's your attitude, mindset, and approach. Congratulations, you have finished the last lesson of our China Business 101 mini course. I just want to, for all of you who actually made it to lesson number 7, I hope you found it beneficial and helpful. For me, this is the first time I've developed kind of an online course, so I'm still working through a lot of the technical issues of recording and scripting and mixing and just making videos. So so I appreciate, again, any feedback and comments, and I look forward to engaging with more of you at our Facebook group, CLD Nation, and continuing this journey together. Hi, this is Gene. You have just finished the last video of this China Business 101 mini course. So I hope you were able to gain some helpful tips and insights about doing business in China. For today's video, so you often see at the end of the videos, I have this phrase, aim towards the center and discover greater success in China, or something like that. So today I want to really get into what do we mean by aim at the center. So this is gonna, we talk about self-awareness and empathy, and we try to apply these essential soft skills to improving how we are perceived in a cross-cultural situation. And then we try to apply these core soft skills to everything that we do. And I've tried to further apply those to doing business in China, giving you some common mistakes and misperceptions to help you kind of develop your empathy and self-awareness, and basically understanding how other people think and feel, and also understanding how you are perceived by others. So this aim towards the center, it originated because my wife is Chinese. Even though we met in the United States, she was born and raised in mainland China. So a lot of her core values and core beliefs and core culture is still very Chinese. Even though she works for a multinational company and she's traveled all over the world. That's really irrelevant, because it's basically where you come from is where your core values and core cultural beliefs originate. So this aim for the center is, it doesn't matter how high my level of emotional intelligence might or might not be, or how empathetic I think I am. Couples will still have disagreements, and oftentimes really minor disagreements will escalate. And they usually escalate because of a failure to communicate. And so the source of a failure to communicate is generally emotions. So I'm sure all of you have experienced that, both in your personal lives and in your professional lives. So for me, the inspiration for aim towards the center is because I am trying to become a master of cross-cultural performance myself, and I'm trying to teach others how to be masters of cross-cultural performance. I have started to try to really observe when I have a disagreement with my wife, why it escalates. And I observe kind of what I say, and even though it's logical in my mind, why it doesn't register in her mind. And if I can make that connection, and if I can bridge that disconnect, then maybe it can help us move forward or resolve whatever minor disagreement we had and not let it escalate. And the reason that I bring this up is because I think fundamentally, if you can imagine improving the way that you communicate with your significant other during a time of emotional disagreement, then that imagination will help you understand kind of how you should communicate with other people in a cross-cultural situation and not let it escalate, avoid misunderstandings, and of course ultimately avoid conflict. And what I discovered is that this is where I really was able to understand the essence of circular thinking. So circular thinking is commonly referred to that Chinese think in a circular manner and Westerners think linearly. So this kind of dichotomy makes it really difficult to actually get on the same page. I think it goes a little bit beyond that. it's not just that Chinese think circularly. I think that anytime somebody is emotional, then they are exhibiting characteristics of circular thinking. Usually when people get emotional, it's not the things that they argue about that are the things that they care about. It's really how they feel and how they feel about how you will respond or how you react. So what typically leads to an escalation is if I'm thinking logically or linearly, I'll just address some specific thing. And then it'll make it worse if the person that I'm arguing with, in case this case might be my wife, that she will cite an example from a past experience, or she'll say something that I find totally irrational and illogical. And so I will respond naturally in kind. And that's kind of the source of an escalation of disagreements, when fundamentally two people's ideas may not be that far apart. So in a cross-cultural situation, and in this situation, what I discovered is you really have to direct your empathy towards the center to achieve more favorable outcomes, or in the case of a relationship, to not escalate something that really is meaningless. So how do you do that? How do you direct your empathy towards the center? Well, first is, every time my wife and I have a disagreement, I always have to imagine why she feels what she feels. So I look at it from the context of the environment in which she was raised, and then I say, okay, the way that she reacts is actually perfectly normal. Even if I think it's emotional and irrational, in the context of how Chinese people behave and how Chinese people react, and how Chinese people, even amongst family members, still care about their face, because it's just so ingrained in how everyone was raised that you have to protect your face, you have to save face, you have to have face, and then you also have to give face. So this whole concept of face is something that I really didn't internalize, and in this case, in communicating with my wife. So once I started directing my empathy towards the center, which means that I kind of ignored the extenuating circumstances of things that could be points of contention, and I just went straight to sympathizing, empathizing, and understanding the source of why, on the surface, I didn't think I said anything wrong or did anything wrong. I have to acknowledge that in the context of how she feels, it was wrong, because that was the source of her negative emotion. Okay, so obviously that inspired me to write the article, which I'm going to share in the email, Aim Towards the Center and Achieve More Favorable Outcomes in China. So that was the inspiration for the story. And then the challenge now is for me to apply it into a context that's teachable, which helps you develop tools to develop your soft skills and be more successful in a cross-cultural situation. And the challenge for you is to start to imagine how to behave differently and how to think differently. And that's kind of the key to developing soft skills to be more successful in a cross-cultural environment. And that is just basically thinking differently. It reminds me of the movie Doctor Strange, in which Doctor Strange is going on this journey. He's incredibly smart. He's the world-renowned neurosurgeon. But in order for him to achieve the path that will enable him to heal his hands, his master basically told him, you have to forget everything you know to be true in order to go on this journey. So that is kind of the challenge for all of you. In order to be a master of cross-cultural performance, you have to kind of forget everything you know to be true and kind of reinvent yourself. I want to think differently. I want to be more empathetic, and I want to have greater self-awareness of what other people perceive, and I'm optimistic that ultimately this will lead to greater rewards and better outcomes down the road. Okay, so thank you for going through this course. If you skipped a few videos, I hope you can go back. Again, a lot of these videos are very rough, and hopefully the next China Business 102, which actually isn't about China business, it's about cross-cultural performance. Hopefully the quality of those videos will increase, and also the quality of the content that I'm able to deliver will also improve as I get more comfortable recording myself and making videos. Okay? So, thank you very much for listening, and again, please share these videos, leave me your questions and leave me your comments. Join CLD Nation and post your questions there, and let's have a conversation on our journey towards cross-cultural performance mastery. Thank you.